With the Crazy Cat's barracks done, the Seabees began construction of the NAF swimming pool, a rare attraction in Vietnam, one usually reserved for Major Command headquarters. The prefabricated pool and equipment was provided by the Crazy Cats and, contrary to popular belief, was not an ASA perk or a gift from some state government. The true story is much more intriguing. A unit supply officer's ability to perform is often based upon their ability to network and horse trade. Early in the year, the unit supply officer, Chief Warrant Officer Gil Sheff, had struck up a conversation with the area Special Services officer. Special Services had a prefabricated pool still in the crates, but since they already had the Tiger Lake R&R Center, they didn't really need the pool. The pool was up for trade, but what could the Crazy Cats offer? Tiger Lake was fine for swimming, skiing, and sailing, but what about fishing? The varieties of fish there were neither fun to catch nor good to eat. It would be great if they could stock it with rainbow trout, but where could they find them in Vietnam? Warrant Officer Sheff thought he might have an answer, and he made a deal. If he could get the Special Services some rainbow trout, the Crazy Cats would get a pool. There were no rainbow trout in Vietnam, but what about the Philippines? Americans had been there for a century, so maybe they had brought rainbow trout at some time or other. The Crazy Cat's next corrosion control flight to Sangley Point had a special mission to perform. Upon arrival, they sent a search party across the bay to Manila and paid a visit to the Department of Fisheries. To their pleasant surprise, there was a fishery that grew rainbow trout fry, and they were available in quantity at a reasonable price. Now, how would they get them back to Cam Ranh? Back at NAF, the Crazy Cats came up with a plan. On the next flight to Sangley, they took with them one of the empty Bombay fuel bladders they had used when ferrying the Neptunes across the Pacific. During the plane's cleaning, they had the Filipino workers steam clean the inside of the fuel bladder. They then flew to Clark Air Force Base on the mainland, where the fishery delivered 50,000 fry and poured them and the water into the tank. The Crazy Cat crew then lifted the heavy tank into the Bombay and closed the door. Back at NAF, the tank was unloaded onto a 2.5-ton truck and driven to Tiger Lake, where the fish were released. The truck drove back to NAF with the pool and equipment. Now that the Crazy Cats had a pool, they needed a place to put it. Solving that problem became the task of Warrant Officer Sheff's successor, Warrant Officer Glenn Trumpauer. He went to the NAF base commander, Naval Captain Henderson. Although Captain Henderson enthusiastically supported the pool's installation, he had to get permission from the Navy's Pacific Command in Hawaii. Permission was denied. Undeterred, Captain Henderson ordered the Seabees to construct the pool and report it as a water reservoir for the NAF Fire Department. The Crazy Cats and the Navy were happy to share their good fortune with others at Cam Ranh, particularly with the patients at 6th Convalescent Center who made regular visits to the pool.
In the summertime when the weather is high, you can stretch right up and touch the sky. When the weather's fine, you got women on your mind. And see what you can find. If a daddy's rich, take her out for a meal. If a daddy's poor, just do what you feel. Speed along the lane, you can turn or a turn of 25. When the sun goes down, you can make it good and live by. We're not bad people, we're not dirty, we're not mean. We love everybody, but we do as we please. When the weather's fine, we go fishing or go sailing in the sea. We're always happy, lives we're living, yeah, that's our philosophy. Sing along with us, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, da-da-da-da-da, yeah, we're happy, da-da-da, dee-da-da-dee-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da, alright, da-da-da-da-da. Alright, we're not bad people, we're not dirty, we're not mean. We love everybody, but we do as we please. When the weather's fine, we go fishing or go sailing in the sea. We're always happy, lives we're living, yeah, that's our philosophy.
That June, the new unit supply officer performed a little magic of his own, presenting the Crazy Cat enlisted men with pallets of highly prized plywood and 2x4s, along with boxes of nails, door hinges, and handles. The officers' and NCO's quarters had been constructed with two-man rooms, and now the enlisted men would have theirs. Borrowing tools from the Seabees, the enlisted men spent a day or two building their own cubicles, gaining one of the rarest of military commodities, personal privacy. The 15th of June signified the PCOD for the original Crazy Cats. 2 weeks before D-Ros was considered the soldiers' PCOD, the Pussy Cutoff Date, the date when soldiers would refrain from sexual relations with local women, since contracting a disease would require them to remain in Vietnam until cured. Before the original group could D-Ros at the end of June, they'd once again be reminded why they get their $65 a month flight pay. When landing at Da Nang after the day's mission, Neptune No. 531 blew its starboard tire, sending the aircraft careening off the runway, nearly flipping over. With the nose gear and port wheel trenched into the earth, the port engine prop struck the ground, sending debris flying. 531 was the same unlucky aircraft that had been hit by AAA fire on Easter morning. Operator Al Takaki had been equally unlucky, finding himself aboard 531 on both occasions, and says with authority that this latest incident was very much the scarier. 531 was out of commission several weeks, but after an engine change and repairs to the nose gear, it would fly many more missions. While the original Crazy Cats had a D-Ros of 29 June, they would leave for Saigon a few days earlier for out-processing. Like other short-timers, their final night with their unit called for the biggest celebration of the year.
It's a square dance, Mr. Marshall, it's a square dance on the floor.
It's a square dance, Mr. Perkins, it's a square dance to be sure, to be sure.
Mrs. Riley, round the partners.
I'm just a clown that used to run around. I used to have a million friends. I used to start where everybody ends, but I just give my best to my friends.
Something akin to a bachelor's party, the occasion was often greeted with mixed emotions, like this hail and farewell party at the Sandman Club. The joy of going home to the world was tinged with the sadness of parting with comrades in arms with whom they had developed a special brotherhood, the kind that could only be forged in the fires of war.
Just give my best to my friends.
So you should.
And when you think that your life isn't right, you know the day isn't always like ice. You've had your peace, now it's time for you to fight. Just give your best to your friends.
For many Crazy Cats, the 365th day in Vietnam would not be their last. Some, particularly career soldiers, would be reassigned to Vietnam again after serving elsewhere for a year or so. Many others, especially the young and single, would volunteer for a 6-month extension of their Vietnam tour, some not only once but twice and even 3 times, giving the first RR one of the highest extension rates of any unit in Vietnam. A major incentive to extend one's tour of duty was the Army's extension program, which granted volunteers a special leave, authorizing free 30 days leave and round-trip air travel to any place in the world. Including allotted travel time, the leave could total 45 days. During the 6-month extension, a soldier was also entitled to another R&R and another 7-day leave. For Crazy Cats, an extension would likely include another corrosion control flight to the Philippines as well. Cam Ranh was relatively secure, and its facilities, especially at NAF, were hard to match at any other ASA station in the world, which were often remote. Equally important, Crazy Cat volunteers believed their mission was having an important and direct impact upon the war, and that their experience was needed. Whether going on special leave, going to a new duty station, or in some cases returning to civilian life, Crazy Cats would first fly to Tan Son Nhut to process out at Davis Station and attend a debriefing at White Birch. Within a day or two they'd travel to Long Bin's 90th Replacement Battalion, counting down their last few hours in Vietnam with hundreds of other soldiers waiting for a flight home.
Give me a ticket for an aeroplane. Ain't got time to take a fast train. Lonely days are gone, I'm a-going home. My baby just wrote me a letter.
Once issued their MAC boarding passes, they were called to formation for inspection. Ordered to remove their caps, an NCO walked down the lines, a 12-inch ruler in hand, stopping to measure hair that appeared to be longer than the regulation 2 inches. Scrutiny was also paid to non-compliant mustaches and sideburns. Those failing inspections had their MAC boarding passes taken and were directed to a nearby barber shop. Only after coming into regulation would their boarding passes be returned. At a time when shoulder-length hair was the fashion among young men in America, few of the young soldiers wanted to return with military-style haircuts. One might as well carry a flashing neon sign saying, "I'm a soldier." This at a time when soldiers were held in such disdain among American youth that they'd been outcast, even called names like baby killer. Still, faced with the choice of a haircut or being detained in Vietnam, none would refuse the haircut. Once all had passed inspection, they boarded buses for the trip to the aerial port at Bien Hoa Air Base, where they exchanged their MPC back to U.S. currency and had their baggage checked at customs. With the boarding announcement, their long wait was nearly over. For many, the stewardesses who greeted them at the boarding ramp were the first round-eyed women they'd seen in months. Once the men were aboard and seated, doors were closed, the boarding ramps towed away, and the engine started. Taxiing to the end of the runway, they turned. The engine's whine turned to a roar as they rumbled down the runway until the wheels left the ground, evoking a cheer so loud it drowned out even the engine's roar. After a day of island hopping back across the Pacific, they had touched down again at California's Travis Air Force Base. Disembarking, more than a few men would stop and kneel to the tarmac to kiss the sweet American soil. Still, they couldn't go home just yet. First, they had to go to Oakland Army Terminal to turn in their tropical clothing, get a medical check, and collect their travel pay and unpaid wages. They were also given a meal ticket for a 24-hour mess hall, offering as much T-bone steak as they could devour. For many, it would be their last meal as soldiers. Their duty was now done, and for them, at least, the war was over. In Vietnam, the war and the Crazy Cat's mission continued. July brought Cam Ranh its monsoon season.
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm.
That September, it also brought a typhoon. All aircraft were evacuated before it hit the base on the 10th, with the RP-2Es flying to an airbase in Thailand. If one had questioned why there were sandbags placed upon the corrugated steel roofs of buildings, the typhoon answered it. Rain blew fast and hard, almost horizontally in the howling winds. Although the NAF appeared to be flat, most of it was under a foot of water. When the typhoon had passed a couple days later, it allowed the aircraft to return and the Seabees to complete construction on the Navy's Paraloft, where they would repair and repack parachutes and maintain ejection seats.